In recorded history, one storm stands as the deadliest and most catastrophic natural disaster ever documented, yet remarkably few people know it occurred. This tempest didn't just claim lives and destroy communities, it nearly triggered a global nuclear conflict that could have ended civilization as we know it. This is the story of how atmospheric chaos, political negligence, and international tensions converged into what became known as the Bola Cyclone of 1970, an event whose consequences extended far beyond meteorology into the realm of geopolitical catastrophe. During early November 1970, clouds began gathering over the Bay of Bengal off India's coast, signaling an approaching storm system. Meanwhile, 800 miles northward, residents of East Pakistan continued their daily routines, completely oblivious to the danger developing in distant waters. On November 8th, meteorologists detected slow-rotating cloud formations deep within the Bay of Bengal, indicating a minor tropical disturbance was forming. Within just 24 hours on November 9th, this system underwent explosive intensification, transforming into a full tropical storm. A hurricane or cyclone was rapidly organizing. By November 10th, the storm had strengthened considerably, and more alarmingly, tracking data revealed a distinct trajectory heading directly toward East Pakistan's coastline at an alarming velocity. Those monitoring radar systems watched with growing concern. The following day, November 11th, the system achieved the highest classification, a severe cyclone. The powerful storm churned toward land with unrelenting momentum. However, most coastal residents dismissed the approaching weather system because storms of moderate size regularly affect the region. Tragically, nobody realized this particular storm would prove catastrophically different. It would become infamously known as the Bola Cyclone, demonstrating what happens when a perfect storm strikes Earth under the worst possible conditions. After the cyclone reached maximum intensity, the full scope of its danger became apparent. This wasn't merely another random tropical cyclone. Rather, it became a demonstration of how one storm could escalate into something threatening global stability. Unfortunately, the deadly system would make landfall very soon, but a critical problem existed. Nobody along the bay seemed concerned about the approaching tempest. Normally, with such dangerous systems, meteorologists and emergency officials would frantically sound alarms, urging evacuation and shelter preparations. Instead, silence prevailed. The truth reveals an even darker reality. East Pakistani residents weren't dismissing the storm's severity. They literally had no knowledge of its existence. For a storm this powerful, complete emergency system failure wouldn't constitute a minor problem but would prove absolutely fatal. In 1970, East Pakistan possessed extremely limited emergency infrastructure. Radar installations, warning sirens, and detection equipment capable of alerting civilians to deadly storms were extraordinarily scarce. Additionally, the region lacked adequate disaster response systems once storms arrived. Strangely, surrounding nations possessed better capabilities. India, for example, maintained sufficient weather detection systems and had identified the forming storm days earlier. India knew throughout the entire period that this dangerous cyclone was barreling toward Pakistan. However, due to two previous wars between the nations, political tensions meant India had little incentive to alert Pakistani authorities earlier. The East Pakistani population received no storm warnings from any source. This would prove disastrous. Being unable to prepare for such a powerful system and facing it without protection is, understating considerably, absolutely terrifying. But consider this. Not knowing when the storm would strike would become the least of their concerns. Around November 12th, the darkened sky harbored the most dangerous element of this entire disaster, a full moon. Why would lunar phases matter? The answer elevates this storm to unprecedented destructive capability and explains why it became history's most dangerous storm. Full moons create significantly higher tides through gravitational pull, raising water levels approximately 20% higher than normal. These elevated tides proved catastrophic because the Bola cyclone could now literally drag ocean waters inland. allowing terrifying inundation across East Pakistan's low-lying terrain. The storm was approaching at literally the worst astronomical timing possible. Finally, on November 12th, residents received some warning. After recognizing the true danger, Pakistan's meteorological department issued reports and transmitted radio messages about the cyclone. However, the department possessed limited information because their data originated from central Pakistan. Central Pakistan had developed a new 4-point severity scale, with 4 representing maximum danger. But East Pakistan still utilized the traditional 10-point scale where 10 indicated worst severity. When radio broadcasts transmitted fragmented warnings about great danger ahead, scale 4, civilians felt confused and dismissed it, assuming 4 seemed nowhere near 10's severity. They didn't realize that 4 meant catastrophic. Unfortunately, simple radio messages proved insufficient to motivate most residents. People wouldn't take warnings seriously based solely on brief radio announcements. Why such inadequate preparation? This wasn't the region's first major storm either. Previously, multiple deadly hurricanes had killed thousands, and following these disasters, the central Pakistani government had contacted American officials for assistance in developing better storm preparedness. However, due to political complications between West and East Pakistan, the central government failed to implement many planned improvements for East Pakistan. East Pakistan was receiving profoundly inadequate support from virtually every direction. At this point, attempts to improve conditions came too late. The Bola cyclone was about to strike East Pakistan's shores. The horrifying cyclone was approaching landfall with additional devastating factors. East Pakistan, now known as Bangladesh, is an extremely low-lying coastal territory. The land barely rises above water, averaging only 33 feet above sea level. Water from high tides alone regularly floods portions of the country. Hundreds of thousands of people inhabited the coastal zone, completely unaware of how massive this cyclone's impact would become. On November 12th, the Bola cyclone struck the hundreds of thousands of coastal residents with unimaginable ferocity. As the system closed on land, the sun had set completely, plunging everything into pitch-black darkness. Many people were instantly overwhelmed by the pure, raw, disgusting power of a peak-intensity cyclone. The Bola cyclone had made landfall. Rising waters, absurd wind speeds, stinging rain, and storm surge, flooding reaching upward of 33 feet in height. Some locations were completely leveled. Houses, floods, and ocean waters reached the rooftops of most structures, spelling utter catastrophe for those caught anywhere near the shore. No safety existed, no method existed to counter this storm, and nobody had known it was coming. Thousands of families struggled to their homes' highest points. Many prayed their houses stood tall enough, but unfortunately, adequate height was uncommon. Most houses were entirely consumed by the sea. In Manpura, one of hundreds of isolated islands along the affected shoreline, a man named Hafiz and his family climbed to their home's top as floodwaters poured in and rose by the minute. Fortunately, Hafiz's home was among the area's sturdier, more solid constructions, and fortunately it possessed a second floor. Most other homes did not and were nowhere near as sturdy. The area was severely unprepared for 20-foot flooding. Hafiz and his family waited as they watched floodwaters slowly rise above their second-floor steps. With time running short and waters rising faster, Hafiz realized the flood would entirely engulf the 2-story home. He understood the massive 20-foot storm surge would engulf everything coastal and beyond. Safety inside homes was impossible. The only survival method was not being anywhere near the storm. His family was sobbing. Even the men cried and screamed. All of this occurred within 8 minutes for the family that had been told a small cyclone would hit, a family whose home stood more than half a mile from shore. Eventually, Hafiz and his brother struggled to the roof, hoping to get everyone up there away from floodwaters. But reaching the roof exposed them to the heaviest storm imaginable, 155-mile-per-hour winds and rain stinging their skin like pellets. The roof bent and creaked from just two people standing atop it. Having the entire family there was completely impossible. However, in a split moment, Hafiz realized he had a massive, tall, strong coconut tree just 2 feet from the house. His idea, everyone would jump to the tree and cling to it. Everyone could make the jump. It was only 2 feet. Even his grandmother could manage it. Hafiz yelled his plan to the others, saying he would attempt the jump first as a test. In the middle of the night with zero visibility, this jump was extremely dangerous. Regardless, he went for it. Hafiz jumped through the storm toward the coconut tree and succeeded. He yelled, "I made it! I made it!" hoping they would follow. No response came. Assuming the storm was too loud, he yelled again but heard a wave crash over the house roof. Hafiz, still hopeful his family could jump, waited, continuously yelling, "I made it!" Waves slapped against the roof with unrelenting power. Waters continued rising. Hafiz called out to his mother, desperate for a response. His cries transformed from triumph and survival to despair. Hafiz called out to God. For the next hour, Hafiz clung violently to the swaying palm tree, grinding his arms into the bark, absolutely exhausted from holding on for hours in insane winds and rain. Hafiz nearly surrendered to the waters below to join his family. He knew he couldn't hold on much longer. His muscles were exhausted. He'd had enough of this storm. Hafiz wanted to join his family, but just before giving up, the storm fully and utterly stopped. Absolutely confused, Hafiz looked around. Everything calmed. Strong winds became gentle breezes. Rain turned to light showers. Everything settled. Hafiz was in the eye of the storm. Looking around, all he saw was water, debris, and dead bodies floating everywhere. The only significant landmarks were trees and the top 3 feet of Manpura High School, a 3-story building. But Hafiz heard his uncle and aunt yelling for help, trapped in their house. He jumped into the floodwaters and swam to their house. He climbed atop the structure, ripped a hole in the roof, and helped them escape. He asked where everyone was. His uncle yelled that they were all gone. In true annoyance and lack of mercy, the storm wouldn't wait for Hafiz and his uncle to mourn their family's deaths. Somewhere far over the ocean, an angry growl presented itself over the sky like diesel trucks starting simultaneously. The storm had returned. Hafiz, his uncle and aunt gripped tightly onto tall trees as wind gusts hit back at 150 miles per hour. They dug their scratched and cut arms into the tree's bark, holding on for dear life, staying there in winds and rain, gripping as hard as possible throughout the entire night. At 4 a.m, the cyclone's outer edges finally passed Manpura. Hafiz plopped down onto faint bits of his roof that finally showed above the water. He lay there completely motionless, with his entire family's bodies floating in the water below. Hafiz had survived, but he was exhausted, broken, and all he wanted was to die. After the Bola cyclone ended, Hafiz's Manpura recorded that 40,000 of the 50,000 residents were dead. Floodwaters receded, revealing hundreds of miles of destroyed landscape. Hundreds of thousands of bodies washed out into the Bay of Bengal. 90% of all homes were destroyed. All millions of people along the shore and throughout the country of Bangladesh experienced exactly what Hafiz endured: the flooding, clinging to trees hoping for survival, and the lack of preparation due to inadequate information from central Pakistan. Everyone who survived felt absolutely heartbroken and, understandably, beyond description, absolutely furious at the central Pakistani government for the information failure. But you're probably wondering how this led to nearly ending the world. The answer is much darker than imaginable, starting right before the storm even hit. In West Pakistan, the head of government, Yahya Khan, made a terrifying decision during the cyclone. He deliberately chose not to provide aid or assistance for the storm to East Pakistan. He chose not to inform them or help them whatsoever. Why? Because he believed East Pakistanis wouldn't vote for him in the upcoming election. His solution was killing as many people as possible. so he wouldn't worry about unfavorable voters. A disgusting decision that one of his generals later addressed as, quote, a cyclone that solved about 500,000 of their problems. Fortunately, this backfired catastrophically on Khan, leading everyone across Pakistan to unite against him and vote for a man who actually helped during the disaster, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So how did Khan respond? Did he peacefully transfer the presidential title? Absolutely not. He decided to become a dictator instead. He jailed Mujib and started killing everyone in East Pakistan not following his orders. He initiated mass genocide, stating, quote, all we need to do is kill 3 million of them and the rest will eat out of our hands. That's what he did, killing all Bengalis opposing him. Naturally, this started a full-fledged civil war between East and West Pakistan. India, hostile toward Pakistan, jumped in, helping East Pakistan defeat West Pakistan and achieve independence as their own country. However, regarding countries intervening, the United States also jumped in, supporting their ally Pakistan. Tensions soared extremely high with American involvement because the U.S. deployed a warship to the Bay of Bengal. However, this was no ordinary warship. It was nuclear capable, possessing destructive power equivalent to 2,000 Hiroshima bombs. Even worse, the Soviets, allied with India, came to the Bay of Bengal too, bringing their own nuclear warships to counter the US and protect India. This was a massive problem. We're literally looking at potential full-scale nuclear war. Nuclear weapons used by either side could trigger complete nuclear breakdown between their allies. Neither country would cooperate. The two inched toward each other. The Soviets and Americans communicated they would set the whole world on fire if the other didn't back down. Neither backed down. It was literally a nuclear standoff. They inched closer and closer, approaching the brink of launching weapons. The world was perhaps only a day away from nuclear fallout. But suddenly, back in East Pakistan, the East Pakistani resistance forces won the war. They seized the main city Dhaka, meaning East Pakistan was now Bangladesh. The war was over. Fortunately, this miracle swayed everyone involved away from conflict. The US and Soviets withdrew just days before potential annihilation. Finally, after everything Bangladesh endured, it was over, but unfortunately this wouldn't be the end. In reality, Bangladesh had just been struck by the world's biggest cyclone, then by massive genocide. They had nothing to establish a country, no political figures, no money, and broken land. They were left with essentially nothing to start their nation, nothing but genocide and a cyclone's remains. What Bangladesh experienced in 1970 was nothing short of beyond horrifying. The lack of knowledge, the high tides, the storm surge flooding, the lack of assistance from everyone, and overall the entire isolation in their disaster. The Bola cyclone truly hit at the worst possible time. Even to this date, no single storm in history has even approached the death toll and destructiveness of the Bola cyclone. The land of Bangladesh was stripped entirely to its absolute core, completely torn apart by the cyclone. But perhaps Bangladesh wasn't just naked and broken land. Perhaps instead it was new land to grow upon,